If you like audiobooks or audio shows, check out a free trial of Audible. Just click the link in the description.
Welcome to Mindshock. This is your host, Bruce McGuire. Today we have a very interesting topic that comes up in conversation quite often when people are arguing for the side of scientism without realizing it. They think they're for science, but because they don't quite know the definitions of science, scientism, how the scientific method works, or even the basics of logic and reason. And that is what we go over on Mindshock, as well as many, many other things. So we will be tackling peer review and how it factors in, or if related at all, to the actual truth. Once again, if you like the podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell for notifications. If you like the podcast, hit the like button. Feel free to share it across social media platforms. Any questions, comments, thoughts, theories, rebuttals, debunkings, or insults of any kind, leave them in the comments section. You can check us out on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, and Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case and topic requests. So let's dive in right now to peer review. So obviously nobody who understands appeal to authority and appeal to popularity logical fallacies would use peer review to try to prove something. Because if it's true, it's true. Whether almost on any issue, you can find peer-reviewed papers, depending on the peers, that CO2 emissions do not increase the temperature of the Earth, and you can show peer review that they do. And you can do that for just about any topic. You can have peer review on both sides, depending on the peers. Now, how is this related to the actual truth, or is this just another pitfall of illogical and irrational thinking, of herd mentality, of authority, of just of the masses being indoctrinated into the cult of authority or state worship, where they don't understand that studies are funded by certain institutions or interest groups. And you have to follow the money. If you haven't checked out the Mindshock Follow the Money podcast, I go through various misconceptions of the phrase, the origin of the phrase, and how to use it in a logical context. So regarding peer review, this is what the coincidence theorists and the illogical, the cognitive dissonant sheep and lemmings, this is what they don't understand. If a certain allegation about a certain conspiracy or a certain fact being true or untrue, if the rebuttal is, oh, well, peer review proves this, so let's go through the history of peer review. How often is the majority wrong? Most of the time. See, the coincidence theorists really have a hard trouble with understanding that humans are fallible. They're not perfect. Human technology is not perfect. So you can have peer review on DNA testing, and there's a reason more and more people are being exonerated, even when there were DNA matches in previous decades. They were convicted, certain people that were wrongfully convicted were convicted by DNA evidence, by scientific evidence. It was wrong. So even though it was peer-reviewed and shown to be legitimate by fallible humans using fallible human technology, obviously that was not the actual truth. So citing to peer review is not citing to truth. In fact, you could make a really good argument that the opposite of whatever is peer-reviewed is usually true going back through history. Obviously, there are exceptions. Obviously, we're not going to fall for black and white fallacies. It depends on the issue. But history does show that in a large percentage of the time, whatever was peer-reviewed or whatever was consensus, obviously science is not ruled by consensus. That's the opposite. Religion is ruled by consensus. This is the word of God. It must be followed. All priests agree that God exists. If you don't go to seminary school and become a priest, you're not expert enough, and your opinion is invalid. Therefore, you have to take on blind faith as gospel truth that every word in the Bible is true. Sounds silly, huh? But the scientism peddlers promote the same dogmatic, illogical thinking without understanding that peer review is a logical fallacy, and it's a logical fallacy for a reason. So if the conspiracy being alleged against the peer review having the peer review proves the point of the people citing the opposite position. Because if the so-called scientists are working with the wrong information, which is the allegation, if that's true, of course they would all agree on something untrue if the foundation of their thinking was flawed. And that's the allegation. So trying to make a rebuttal using peer review is so silly and illogical. I mean, if the truth happens to align with what certain peer-reviewed studies prove, then cite the actual proof that adheres to the scientific method and demonstrate how it adheres to the scientific method. Citing appeal to authority and appeal to popularity logical fallacies only demonstrates the lack of a coherent, logical, or rational argument. It promotes faith-based dogmatic thinking, aka scientism, which is obviously a real problem for anybody who's concerned with the truth, because real science is, of course, neutral and objective. It doesn't pick sides. And more often than not, I mean, let's say you want to know something about a certain school. Now, or a certain topic. You want the smartest person. You're not going to take, if you take a poll at a particular high school, the valedictorian and the salutatorian, they might be smarter. So even though the majority of the school might have a certain viewpoint, the more intelligent minority, the non-consensus, the smartest of the smart who disagree with the consensus, it's possible they're correct. And it's possible that the consensus picking the opposite position only points to them being even more correct, depending on the issues, depending on the amount of intelligence required to understand whatever topic is being discussed. And again, we keep circling back. Appeal to authority, appeal to popularity. Always a logical fallacy. The truth is the truth, regardless of if anybody believes it or not, and lies are still lies, even if everybody believes them. Now, these are all this is basic common sense, but for some reason, there's a lot of coincidence theorists out there that they fail to grasp these basic concepts. So if we look at anything, like we could do relativity, general relativity, special relativity. Of course, Tesla, the genius that has powered all of our technology that we use today, all wireless tech, everything. Of course, he did not agree with Einstein's relativity, but Einstein kind of hijacked the peer review system, and with all the corruption in the system, that's another thing. Coincidence theorists, I don't know if they're just that sheltered or mentally weak or cognitive dissonant. They can't understand that there are corrupt humans out there. There are greedy, corrupt humans out there that will game the system, take over the system, infiltrate the system. And through either brainwashing, gaslighting, or just flat out fraud and coercion and intimidation, they will hijack the system. And that's kind of what happened with general relativity. So if you examine the history, of course, I've pointed to Run Z Cow's dismantling of relativity in easy to understand fifth grade terms. If you could check out that video on YouTube, Relativity is Wrong, and there's several different parts, and he presents it very logically. So anyone can follow. You don't need any kind of advanced degree of indoctrination or anything like that. So going back to what peer review actually proves and the allegations against it, if everybody's running under the assumption, the faith-based presupposition that mass attracts mass due to mass, and it's not electromagnetic, because of course nobody's denying the force itself. Of course, the cognitive dissonant coincidence theorists are very intellectual dishonest, and they just pretend that these crackpots that support Nikola Tesla are kind of saying that there's no force. Of course, there's a bunch of different forces. There's probably infinite undiscovered forces that we don't even know about, let alone how they would function once discovered. So if electromagnetism is the main force, and there is no mass attracting mass type gravity, of course the peers are all going to disagree with it because they're operating with incorrect faith-based presuppositions. What do they expect to happen? So what is the peer review really proof of? It actually proves it makes a stronger case for those alleging something that's not backed by peer review. And it's all quite amusing. Of course, real science is neutral and objective. Now, in the basics of any kind of debate or logical and scientific discussion, of course, one is not called upon to prove a negative. That's another thing the cognitive dissonant coincidence theorists just don't seem to understand. One is not called upon to prove a negative. The burden of proof is always on the one making the positive claim. And defaulting to appeal to popularity logical fallacies does not make a claim any stronger. Not in the realm of logic and science. Maybe in the realm of cult thinking, of herd mentality. The lemmings are all running off that cliff. If it makes other lemmings more comfortable to run off a cliff with a bigger crowd, then yes, you can appeal to popularity. That might make you feel better. But if we're having any kind of actual logical or scientific discussion or debate, peer review has no place. Because the conspiracy theorists, aka critical thinkers, the ones who are alleging that there's a problem with the system, of course the peer review would prove that there's a problem with the system. Otherwise, the peer review would not support something that's being alleged to being related with a problem with the system. Whether you're talking vaccines or big pharma and how they finance studies. Again, it doesn't mean that the study is untrue, but citing to peer review as the proof, that's the problem. Because if the study is legitimate and it adheres to the scientific method, and that can be demonstrated, not taken on faith, but actually legitimately examined and proven, then it's almost like the peer review is irrelevant. Because if the science shows what it shows, I mean, how much peer review did Tesla have? Yet we're talking on his wireless technology. Peer review is not a factor in truth. If the majority of people actually understood how the scientific method worked and they weren't indoctrinated into the cult of scientism, of course the proponents of scientism would all support scientism. And the peer review is evidence of that. So the coincidence theorists invoking peer review as some kind of an argument and pretending that it's legitimate, obviously it's logically fallacious. And that's why it's so important to understand logic. The principles of validity, what is valid, what is not valid. Now, of course, again, the peers could be accidentally correct. The peer review could be accidentally correct where they're operating with wrong information, but they still come to a conclusion that happens to be correct, even if they didn't follow the scientific method. Let's not dismiss that possibility. Let's not fall for black and white fallacy. This is Mindshock, where the only thing we know for sure is that we don't know anything for sure. Hope you enjoyed another edition of the Mindshock podcast. If you like the podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Questions, comments, thoughts, theories, suggestions, debunkings, rebuttals, leave them in the comment section. If you like the podcast, hit the like button, share it across social media platforms, of which you can check us out on Twitter, Reddit, Facebook, Patreon. This is Bruce McGuire, signing off. Catch you guys next time.